Stacy, I'm a cancer survivor. She's here today right now. But I'm here to share her story, to give you guys an insight into what it's like and why you guys are all here. To start with some backstory, Violet's father and I have known each other since school and got reacquainted after and started dating and got married after 5 years. We got married in October and got pregnant in December. I wanted to be a mommy my whole life and was so overjoyed when Violet came to us. The best way to describe our life before pediatric cancer for me is with a line from one of Violet's favorite movies, which is Tangled. And in the beginning of that movie, there's a line that is, for that moment, everything was perfect, and then that moment ended. I'm sorry. And that moment ended for us when Violet was 16 months old. She started vomiting. She was a normally, typically developing child, and just would randomly vomit in the middle of playing or learning to walk. She never had a fever. So we took her to the pediatrician, and the pediatrician seemed to think that it was just a stomach issue or a food allergy. And so we didn't think much of it until it started to happen more often. And at that point, the pediatrician said to us, you know, sometimes vomiting can be a symptom of brain trauma. And I looked at her and I knew that Violet had never been away from me. I was a stay-at-home mommy, and then she would come to work with me. So I knew she had hit her head, and then nothing had happened, so that seemed crazy to me. But the pediatrician was really insistent. She said, please just do this for me, for my peace of mind. But you have to leave right now to go to Children's Hospital. They can only see you if you're there within 5 minutes. So I looked at my perfect baby, and we were in our pajamas, and I said, we have to go to the hospital to take a picture of your brain. And I'm sure we're going to be right back, and then Mommy will give you a bath, and we'll have a good day. But when we got to the hospital, and they did the brain scan, they pulled me aside and said, have a phone call. And they took me in a dark part of the hospital, and the phone was ringing. And when I answered it, it was my pediatrician. And she said, I'm so sorry. And I said, no, that's okay. I'm not upset. I understand that you had to cover your bases. And she said, no, I'm so sorry because your daughter has a massive brain tumor, and they're coming to talk to you right now. And I looked at Violet, and she was walking around in the hospital smiling and happy. And I started shaking, and I felt like I couldn't breathe. And a neurosurgeon came to talk to me, and I could tell that it was bad. And he said, we're going to have to do surgery first thing in the morning because your daughter is dying. And if any of you are parents in this room can imagine, the air sucked out of the room. And I just kept looking at her and thinking, now Violet, we don't have a family history. I ate organic while I was pregnant. I made all her baby food. There's no way. But then they showed us her actual brain scan, and I could see her profile in the picture, and I knew it was her. So they took her to surgery, and they operated on my perfect baby for 16 hours. They cut her head in a horseshoe shape and removed a massive brain tumor that was solidified, and that's why it took so long to remove it. And post-surgery, they put her in a little bed that looks like a cage, and we weren't allowed to hold her. And I kept looking at her and thinking, what is she thinking she's so little? We can't explain to her why we've done this. We can't even hold her to comfort her. And slowly but surely, she started to recover. And we had about 3 weeks stay in the hospital. And I was so relieved that the tumor was out. And I thought, okay, we're done. And then they came to me and said, your daughter's type of cancer is very aggressive and very rare. It's less than 1 in 3 million odds, so we don't know that much about it. But we need to do chemotherapy. So we need you to come back and we'll start chemo. And I didn't know much about chemo. I had one friend who had had cancer. And she would go to the hospital, she would get chemotherapy, and then she would go to work the same day. So I thought, after brain surgery, that's nothing, we can do that. We came back a few weeks later, and they put a port into Violet's chest, and that same day, they started chemotherapy. And the first time the nurses walked in, they come in what they call blueberry suits, which is basically a step-down hazmat suit. And they have a bag of poison that they're so afraid to spill on themselves. And then they hook it up to a line that goes directly into your baby's heart. And they didn't hook her up to one bag. They hooked her up to 4. Over 3 days, she got 4 different bags of chemo. And she went from a happy little girl who was running around smiling to a baby that was in bed, vomiting 16 to 17 times a day. I'll never forget it when I held her in my lap and tried to run my hands through her hair and it fell out. Sorry. And she went through 5 rounds, and each round consisted of 2 to 3 weeks staying in the hospital in total isolation. Her chemo was so aggressive that we weren't allowed to have family and friends come and visit because she was so weak. That she was a danger for disease and infection. So, again, we were in for 2 to 3 weeks at a time. And family would come up when they were allowed. And my baby learned to walk and run in hospital hallways. One of her first words was nauseous. And it was devastating to me. Everyone kept looking at me and saying, don't worry, to her, she doesn't know that this isn't normal. And that wasn't a comfort to me. I wanted my baby to be in a park and in a swimming pool, not walking hospital hallways. Sorry. So she went through 5 rounds. Her last 2 rounds were the most intense. One of the chemotherapies that she got required a bath, head to toe, every 6 hours, around the clock. So we would finally get her settled and sleeping and comfortable. They'd have to come in and bathe her from head to toe because the chemo would seep through her pores and cause chemical burn. So after 5 rounds that covered roughly 6 months, we were released to go home and be normal, whatever that is. And it took her some time to recover after everything that she'd been through. And now we're one of the lucky families who still has a child. But we still have our struggles. She's here tonight, and she's running around, and she's happy again. But large crowds like this are so much for her because she's used to mommy and Violet in the hospital room and quiet and not large groups of people. She needs physical therapy and occupational therapy and speech therapy a couple times a month. Mommy sees a psychologist once a week for post-traumatic stress disorder. And we're so grateful. But she'll be monitored every 3 months to look for cancer reoccurrence. And that would consist of a 2-hour brain scan where she's sedated and has a breathing tube and knocked out. And it's one of her least favorite things in the world, but it's a small price to pay. So her next scan will be July 11th. And this will be our life for the rest of our lives. But again, we really are grateful. And my heart our prayers every day because my daughter's 2.5 and she's already lost friends. And she's seen her friends have to restart this journey with reoccurrence. But one of my first experiences with her outside of the hospital, you can clearly see that her energy is not one of my first experiences outside of the hospital with her was Nellie's fashion show. And it changed everything for me. Because when we were in that hospital room, just the two of us, I started to feel like no one cared. When you read the statistics that these kids are only getting 4%, you feel like no one's doing anything. And it's devastating. And to go to Nellie's catwalk and see that there is someone doing something, and there is someone who cares, and that all of you care, and want to help us. It's so moving, and we're so grateful. And we were one of the families that had problems making bills after our diagnosis. I lost my job the day that Violet was diagnosed because I couldn't tell them I was going to be back. So we went from 2 incomes to 1, and medical bills are no joke. And we reached out to Nellie several times, once for an eviction notice, and once when our power was going to be shut off, and she graciously helped us both times. But I think more than the financial help is this. This means so much to us families to see all of you supporting and caring for our families in our darkest hour. So thank you so much from the bottom of our hearts. Thank you.